Welcome back. The 15th annual African Utility Week and Clean Power Africa is currently underway at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. It's an opportunity for African power and water utility professionals to meet and discuss the latest trends in energy generation, water and renewable energy. My co-anchor Michelle Craig is there for us this afternoon. Michelle, energy and renewable energy, this convention really couldn't be more topical.
Indeed, Andrew. Let's get an international perspective now on the challenges on the continent. And I'm joined by Amos Hochstein, President Barack Obama's Special Envoy for Energy. Amos, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Absolutely, pleasure to be here. 600
million people without power on the African continent. How does one even begin to address a challenge like that?
Well, that's exactly the point. We have to start somewhere. And that's why President Obama announced the creation of Power Africa just a couple of years ago, and we're expanding our goals. And the goal is to increase the generation of energy and increase the access, how many people have access to power and energy. And we have to take into account that we're in a revolutionary time in energy around the world, and Africa is really poised to take advantage of these technological advances and the changes in the energy landscape.
Tell us about some of the more practical projects on the go with Power Africa on the continent.
Well, there are a number of projects around the sub-Saharan Africa that we are focused on, and we're looking at it as countries want to create and pursue projects. We're going to give the kind of support, advice, and technical expertise to make sure that the projects can develop and get beyond the finish line, whether it's in Ethiopia or a recent one from Gigawatt Global that was completed in Rwanda, or even some emergency areas that we did in Liberia. We're looking at the full scale across the continent. Any country that wants to move forward and needs the technical expertise, the transaction support to be able to get there. But we have a long way to go. We have to change the mindset of what is the role of government and what is the role of the private sector in order to be able to maximize the enormous amount of investment that is going to be required to make a difference.
So there's a paradigm shift needed in thinking about how governments work with the private sector?
Absolutely. I think the role of the government really needs to be to create the kind of investment enabling environment so that the private sector says, I want to come and I want to make that investment. We're looking at it not only from the traditional sense of oil and gas and coal, but also from the perspective of renewable energy. We have more and more new technologies coming online, and they're cheaper today than we ever thought they would be at this point. So how do we take advantage of that? By changing the policies, changing the regulatory environment, changing the laws, allowing for companies to come and invest, learning lessons from around the world of what has worked elsewhere and implementing it here. And that's what we would like to do in working together.
It sounds like incredible plans, and it must carry quite a hectic price tag.
Absolutely, nothing is free, but it's worth it. It's the kind of investment that I believe will generate the economic growth that we're talking about. Look, any company in the energy sector that you talk to around the world and you ask them, where would you ideally like to invest? They say Africa. Because the point of the challenge, the depth of the challenge, is also the opportunity. If you have this kind of an enormous challenge with economic growth projections that are so much greater than anywhere else in the world, why not invest here? So if we can figure out a way to take the barriers away from the investment, I think we can see not only achieving the goals that we set forth for ourselves, but exceeding them quite significantly.
So Power Africa really is about finding long-term solutions to the energy challenges on the continent. But you mentioned Liberia just a little earlier. Power Africa also steps in when there are those crisis and emergency situations?
Well, we had a crisis in Liberia where we were trying to bring the kind of support, medical support and medical units to support the Ebola outbreak. But there was an access to power shortage. So we worked together with the US government teams that were working on the health side to be able to bring 17 generators and step in and do that at a rapid pace and immediate response to have the kind of power needed to be able to stem the Ebola outbreak. So we can step in on the emergency side and bring that. But what's important is to really focus on the long term and how do we also work with governments. You know, instead of thinking about it, every country developing their own distribution, their own generation, how do they interconnect with their neighbors? I don't have to make everything here. I can buy it from my neighbor. So how do we create that interconnection, interoperability between countries and among regions so that we can think about it in the way that we did it elsewhere in the world? And again, I think I'm very optimistic about what the opportunity can be.
Amos, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And as you can see, collaboration also key, even when international players do step in to help on the continent. That was Amos Hochstein, President Barack Obama's special envoy for international energy, joining us here at the CTICC this afternoon.
All right, Michelle, thanks very much indeed. We'll be back to you there in the bottom of Cape Town in about half an hour or so.